I had spent my whole life building this business, piece by piece. My father, 55 now, had worked hard for everything he had, but it wasn't the kind of work that got him respect or admiration from anyone outside of our family. A contracting business that had been running just under the radar for years, nothing flashy but stable. I had been in the thick of it, putting in the same long hours, making sure the job got done right. But lately, it was all starting to feel like it was slipping away. Like I was losing my grip on the one thing I could hold on to. The tension with Karen's family, her brother especially, had always been there, but recently it felt worse. Her brother, Scott, had never respected what I did. He always had something snide to say about the work I did, how it wasn't real business, or how it wasn't a real career. He worked for a bank, or at least he used to, until he got laid off. That's how it went. People lost jobs, and people like Scott, who thought they were above the work I did, ended up with nothing. And now, here he was, living with us. The house was mine. I'd put everything into it, the money, the time, the sweat. I built the office from scratch, this space where I could finally escape the noise, the clutter, the distractions. It was supposed to be my sanctuary, the place I could make calls and meet clients without interruptions. But lately, it had become more of a battleground than anything else. When Scott moved in with his wife and kids, things got complicated. Karen pushed me into a corner, telling me it was the right thing to do. I didn't even get a chance to argue. We were a family, she said. We had to stick together. But I couldn't shake the feeling that it was all falling apart. That what I worked so hard for, the business, the house, everything, was slipping through my fingers. I didn't know it yet, but I was about to lose everything I'd worked for, right in my own house. And it was Scott who was going to be the one to throw me under the bus. I'd barely finished with a client call when I walked into my office that morning, my sanctuary, the place where I could think straight, where I could work without the constant distractions of life. But instead of a clean, quiet workspace, the room was filled with kids' toys, blocks, dolls, stuffed animals, even a damn tricycle. I froze in the doorway, staring at the mess. I had no idea how it got there, or how long it had been like this. "Karen," I called, my voice tight. She came in from the kitchen, trying to act like nothing was wrong. "What's the matter?" "Why is there a playpen in my office?" I asked, stepping in and pushing a few toys aside with my foot. "Scott's kids needed a place to play. I figured the office could work for now," she said, brushing it off like it was no big deal. "You don't mind, do you?" I ran a hand through my hair, frustration building in my chest. "I do mind. I built this space for my business. I need it to stay that way." Karen's expression softened, but it didn't reach her eyes. "We've talked about this. Scott's family's going through a rough time. You can't expect them to live like that." "I'm not expecting anything. I built this office for a reason, Karen. It's my livelihood. You knew that when we agreed to have this space. This isn't just some spare room," I said, keeping my voice calm, though it was harder with every word. Karen sighed, looking away. "I'm not asking you to change everything. Just let it be for now. I'll make sure it's out of here when you need to work." "Just for now," I repeated, irritated. "How long is that going to last? You know it's not like that. I need this office for work. It's not negotiable." Scott appeared in the doorway, looking at me with that smug, passive-aggressive grin that always made my blood pressure spike. "Hey man, you know how it is. Kids need space to run around, right? You can always work somewhere else. You've got that whole house, don't you?" I didn't even try to hide the edge in my voice. "This is my office, Scott, not a playroom." He shrugged, still grinning. "Well, things change, don't they? Not all of us have the luxury of picking and choosing where we work." I clenched my jaw, trying not to let him get under my skin. But it was like he was purposefully trying to undermine me, make me feel like my business was small and unimportant, like I was the one who had to give everything up. "Why don't you take the kitchen or the dining room?" I suggested, though I knew it was pointless. "It's more than enough space for you." Scott shook his head slowly, tapping his fingers on the doorframe. "Yeah, but that wouldn't be as convenient for you, huh?" I turned to Karen. "This isn't okay, Karen. I can't work like this. I need my office." Her expression changed, like she didn't want to hear it. "I don't want to argue about this, okay? It's not that big of a deal." I felt a weight in my chest, like the walls of the house were closing in on me. "To me, it is. This is my business, my future." She didn't respond, just gave me that tired look that always came when she was done talking. That night, after the kids were in bed, Karen came into the room while I was trying to get some work done. She sat down on the bed, avoiding my eyes. "I've made a decision," she said, voice flat. "The office is going to be a playroom for Scott's kids. It's non-negotiable. They need it." I stopped typing and looked at her, the reality of it sinking in. "What do you mean non-negotiable? You can't just decide that." She didn't flinch. "I can. I'm tired of this. We've been doing everything for you, and I'm done with the complaints." I felt my stomach drop, the anger bubbling up. "This is my home, too. I've worked hard for everything in it. I built this office, Karen." "I know," she said quietly, "but it's not just yours anymore. It's all of ours." The kitchen was the only place left where I could pretend to work, though it was impossible. The noise was unbearable. Scott's kids arguing over toys, Karen trying to keep them calm, while still asking me questions every 5 minutes. I set my laptop on the table and tried to focus, but it was like the walls were closing in on me. My business, the one thing I could still count on, felt like it was unraveling in front of me. I took a call from a client, but the background noise made it impossible to concentrate. The kids screamed, then Karen yelled at them to quiet down. The client asked me if everything was all right, and I had to force a smile through the phone. "Yeah, everything's fine," I said, but I knew it wasn't. The deal we'd been working on for months, one that could have given me some breathing room, slipped right through my fingers. I hung up and ran my hand over my face. My stomach was tight, and the familiar pressure of failure started to creep in. I couldn't afford this. I couldn't afford to lose clients, to lose momentum. But that's exactly what was happening. The noise, the constant interruptions, the feeling of being unheard. It was eating away at me. Karen came in then, smiling like everything was fine. "You okay?" she asked, as if I wasn't visibly losing my shit right in front of her. "Yeah," I muttered, though I didn't believe it for a second. "Just great." She didn't notice. Of course she didn't. She was too busy trying to keep Scott's kids entertained, while ignoring everything I was trying to do to make sure we didn't fall under. I needed space, but every room in this damn house was being overtaken. Not just by the kids, but by this suffocating sense of being powerless. The worst part was Karen didn't get it. She didn't see the stakes. I looked over at Scott, who was lounging on the couch, pretending to look busy on his phone. He had nothing to do but be here, sucking up the space, taking up the air. It infuriated me. I couldn't even focus on my work without him dismissing it like it was some kind of joke. "Scott," I said, trying to keep the frustration out of my voice. "I need this space back. I can't work with this chaos going on." He glanced up from his phone, a lazy smirk tugging at the corners of his mouth. "Come on, man. Don't act like you're really doing anything that important. You're just building stuff, right? It's not like you're running a corporation or something." I felt my face flush with heat. "What the hell is that supposed to mean?" He shrugged, casual as always. "It's just, easy work. No big deal. You can work from anywhere, right? Doesn't matter where." "Easy?" I spat, standing up from the table. "You have no idea what I do, Scott. None. My whole business, my entire livelihood, depends on this office." He let out a short, dismissive laugh. Right. But you don't get it, do you? You're so focused on your little business, but you're still stuck in the past. You really think your work's gonna make or break you? It's not that important." I stood there, the weight of his words hitting me like a punch to the gut. Everything I had worked for, the years of blood, sweat, and stress, it all felt like it didn't matter anymore. My worth wasn't just being ignored, it was being reduced to nothing. I wanted to argue, to yell, to make him understand, but it felt pointless. Karen was right there, and she wasn't saying a word. She wasn't defending me. I realized in that moment that it wasn't just Scott I had to worry about. It was Karen, too. She didn't get it, didn't understand what this was doing to me, to my business, to everything I had worked for. That night, after the kids were in bed, Karen handed me a piece of paper. It was folded, the edges sharp, and my heart sank before I even opened it. "What's this?" I asked, already knowing. "Divorce papers," she said flatly, her gaze not meeting mine. "I can't keep doing this. I can't keep pretending that you and your work are the priority when it's so clear that they're not." I stared at the paper, a cold knot settling in my chest. It wasn't just a slap in the face. It was everything falling apart, all at once. I felt that familiar sense of losing control, of everything slipping through my fingers. I thought we were a team, I said, voice low. That's what you said. We are, she replied, her voice cold. But there was something in her eyes, something I couldn't quite read. But I can't keep choosing you over them anymore. I looked at the paper again, then back at her. My stomach churned, but I couldn't let myself break down. Not now, not when there was too much at stake. I thought about walking away. Hell, I wanted to. But there was something more at stake than just my pride. It wasn't just my business I was losing. It was my damn life. I didn't even look at the divorce papers after Karen handed them to me. The sting of her words still hung in the air, and all I could do was stand there, feeling like I'd been sucker punched. She thought she could walk away from everything I'd given up for this family, everything I'd worked for. The betrayal wasn't just her leaving. It was the fact that, after all those years of sacrifice, all she could see was her own comfort. She'd never supported me the way I needed. She'd never understood what it meant to build something from nothing, what it cost to keep it going. I couldn't let this be my end. Not like this. I grabbed my phone, the need for something solid, something real pushing me forward. Frank. I hadn't spoken to him in years, but he was the one person I knew I could count on. A real businessman, the kind of guy who'd turned a small, struggling shipping logistics firm into a nationwide operation. He had always said if I ever needed help, I could reach out. It felt like a long shot, but what the hell did I have left to lose? I dialed his number, my heart racing a little. When he picked up, his voice was familiar, gruff, like nothing had changed. Frank, I said, trying to keep the edge out of my voice. It's me. I know it's been a while. Yeah, I know, kid, he replied, not missing a beat. What's up? I took a deep breath, trying to shake the weight of everything that had happened. I need your advice. My business. It's falling apart, and I don't know where to turn. There was a brief silence on the other end. That bad, huh? Worse, I admitted. I've got people in my life making it worse. My own family, and now my wife. She's giving up on me, on everything I've worked for. Frank let out a heavy sigh. Sorry to hear that. You were always a hard worker. Hell, I've been watching you from afar. But you gotta know, the world doesn't stop just because things get tough. I know, I said, the bitterness in my voice impossible to hide. But it feels like it's slipping through my fingers. I don't know how much more I can take. Look, I don't have time for a pity party, but I might be able to help you out. My business, it's struggling too, financial trouble. We're trying to modernize, but we need someone who can get things in order. Someone who knows logistics, someone who knows systems. You've got that background, don't you? I blinked, stunned for a second. You want me to come work for you? No, Frank replied, his voice firm but not unkind. I want you to help me turn this thing around. I've been talking to the board, and we need a new direction. You've got the skills, I've got the resources. If you can turn it around, you can run the place with me. You'll have a shot at ownership down the line. I leaned back against the kitchen counter, my mind spinning. This was everything I had been looking for. An opportunity, a chance to get control again. A shot at something bigger. I don't know, Frank, I said slowly, the weight of it all settling on my shoulders. I've got a lot going on. My life's falling apart here. You think I haven't been where you are? Frank shot back. You think I haven't had my ass handed to me? But you can't give up. You've got to take the opportunity when it comes. I thought about it. My pride, my business, my future. They were all on the line. I had nothing left to lose. If I didn't take this chance, I'd regret it for the rest of my life. All right, I said, the decision solidifying in my gut. I'm in, I'll help, I'll do whatever it takes to turn things around. Good. That's the attitude I like. I'll have my team reach out. Let's see if we can't make something out of this mess. I ended the call and sat there for a moment, feeling a sense of resolve that I hadn't felt in a long time. I wasn't going to take this lying down. It was time to fight back, not out of anger, but with a plan. I had the skills, the connections, and now I had a way to take control of my life again. No more waiting around, no more letting things happen to me. Frank had just offered me a lifeline, and I wasn't about to let it go to waste. The next few days were a blur of phone calls and meetings. Frank and I spent hours on the phone, strategizing, planning, and piecing together how we could modernize his company. The logistics firm had been around for years, but it was stuck in the past. Old systems, outdated tech, everything was running at half capacity. Frank didn't want to hear it at first, but he'd come around when I laid out the numbers. The world was changing, and his business was struggling to keep up. I wasn't just offering advice, I was offering a lifeline. We need to streamline operations, I told him on one of our calls. We need better software, better tracking systems, and we need to automate. If we can eliminate these inefficiencies, we can save a fortune. We'll improve customer service and cut costs. That's where the real savings are. Frank was skeptical at first. You sure this will work? The company's got a lot of debt, and the board's breathing down my neck. I'm sure, I said, my voice steady. But we have to be smart about it. We'll start with a few key areas, and if we see results, we roll it out company-wide. This could flip the whole thing around. He paused. I could hear him turning it over in his head. All right, let's give it a shot. If it works, you'll be the one running the place. I'm not going to last much longer if we don't turn things around. That was when I saw it, the opening. Frank was desperate, but so was I. I wasn't just helping him anymore. I was taking a stake in the company, literally. Frank had hinted at offering me a position with real power if I could turn things around. I wasn't sure I'd be able to work the kind of magic he needed, but if I did, that was a shot at something far bigger than I'd ever dreamed. I started researching every angle I could think of. Digital systems, supply chain solutions, any edge I could get. And despite the mockery from Scott and Karen, my knowledge of modern systems, the very skills they had laughed off as unimportant, were becoming my biggest asset. They thought my business was small time. They thought the work I did was beneath them. But in that moment, I realized how much more I was capable of. I was no longer just a contractor. I was a problem solver. I had something real to offer the world outside this house, and I wasn't going to let their dismissive attitude hold me back anymore. I didn't tell Karen what I was up to. I knew she wouldn't understand, and I didn't have the energy for another argument. Besides, the less she knew, the better. I was playing my hand quietly, keeping my moves close to my chest. I had no idea how things were going to play out with Frank's company, but I couldn't sit around anymore, letting everything fall apart. The more I dug into the logistics firm's numbers, the more I realized how close they were to sinking. Frank had been hanging on by a thread, desperate to avoid the company's collapse. But what really hit me was the opportunity that came with it. I wasn't just trying to save a sinking ship. I was about to buy into it, take on a significant stake in the company if I could make it work. I wasn't just working for Frank anymore. I was building a new life, a new future. I had a chance to flip everything, my career, my financial situation, even my standing in my own damn house. Every move I made was calculated. I knew how to play this game. But this wasn't just about money anymore. It was about respect. The respect I'd lost with Karen, the respect I'd never gotten from Scott, the respect I deserved in the business world. If I pulled this off, I wouldn't just save Frank's company. I'd rebuild my own life from the ground up, and this time, I wouldn't be asking for permission. The twist, though, was the real risk. Frank's company wasn't just a lifeline, it was a gamble. If I failed, everything I'd just invested, my time, my money, my energy, would be gone. There'd be no second chance. But I wasn't about to back down. I had just bought into the company, and now I had no choice but to make it work. It had been weeks since I'd made the decision to invest in Frank's company, and the more I dove into it, the clearer the path ahead became. Things were starting to turn around, slowly but surely. But that didn't change the reality of what was going on at home. I'd been playing it cool, keeping my head down, but I knew it was time to deal with the house situation. Karen and Scott had been living here rent-free for far too long, and now I had leverage. I walked into the living room one evening, Scott lounging on the couch, flipping through some sports channel. Karen was in the kitchen, doing the dishes like everything was normal. I'd been building up to this for a while, but now it was time to hit them with the hard truth. "Karen," I said, my voice steady, "we need to talk about the house." She glanced over, wiping her hands on a towel. "What's going on?" "You and Scott are going to start paying market rent," I said, looking directly at her. "I've had enough of this." The air shifted immediately. Scott looked up from the TV, his usual passive-aggressive grin wiped off his face. "What the hell are you talking about?" he sneered, trying to downplay it. "I'm talking about this house," I said, turning to him. "You've been here long enough without contributing, and I've let it slide, but not anymore. Either you start paying rent, or you move out." Scott stood up, his posture defensive. "You can't just kick us out. You're not even married to her anymore, man. This place is as much Karen's as it is yours." "That's where you're wrong," I shot back, keeping my voice calm but firm. It's my house, and I've made the decision. Karen can stay, but not under these conditions. She's free to make her own choice, but you've got no say in it." Scott took a step forward, his jaw tightening. "You're gonna pull that power trip, huh? What, now you think you got everything figured out? Your business is still a joke." I felt the familiar anger rising in my chest, but I held my ground. "You can call it whatever you want, Scott, but I've got a real plan now. You've been making your jokes about my work, but I'm not some small-time contractor anymore. You don't get to walk all over me." Scott scoffed, shaking his head. "You think this is your big power move? You're still the same guy, pretending to be important." "You're not in a position to talk down to me," I said, my voice cold. "I've worked for everything I have. Now I'm asking you to either pay rent like anyone else or leave. Your choice." Karen stepped in then, looking uneasy. She didn't say anything at first, just glanced at Scott, then back at me. "Are you serious?" she asked, her voice quieter now. "You can't just force us out like this. We're family." I didn't blink. "I'm not forcing anyone out. I'm giving you a choice, but it's going to be a real one now. You either start paying or you go." She stared at me for a long time, and I could see the wheels turning in her head. She was realizing that she couldn't just dismiss me anymore, that the power had shifted and not in her favor. Finally, she sighed, the fight leaving her. "All right, fine. We'll pay rent, but you don't have to make it so harsh." I felt a knot tighten in my stomach, the sting of using legal pressure to regain control of my own home hitting me like a slap. But I couldn't back down now. If I gave in, it would be the same old dynamic. Me, walking on eggshells, afraid to assert myself. "The rent will be fair," I said, a finality to my tone. "But it's non-negotiable. I'm done being the one to bend." Karen nodded reluctantly. She didn't like it, but she wasn't in a position to argue anymore. The tables had turned, and I wasn't going to let them forget it. Scott gave me one last glare, but he didn't say anything else. His words had no weight anymore. Not with me, not after everything I'd done to get to this point. I watched them both as I turned and walked out of the room. There was still a long road ahead, but this was my first victory in a long time. The house was mine again, no strings attached, and I wasn't about to let anyone forget it. The business with Frank was taking off. The logistics firm, once on the verge of collapse, was slowly becoming something that felt real again. I was on the ground, making moves, restructuring systems, cutting inefficiencies. I wasn't just part of the process anymore, I was driving it. Every decision I made counted, and the results started to show. Clients were happy, the board was seeing improvement, and Frank had made me a key player in the company's future. I wasn't just working for a paycheck. I was building something that had the potential to change everything. The pressure I'd been carrying for months was finally starting to lift. With the business stabilizing, I wasn't just surviving, I was thriving. And for the first time in a long while, I felt like I was in control. Karen and Scott, on the other hand, were moving out. It wasn't something I wanted to celebrate, but it was something that needed to happen. The strain had gone on long enough. Karen wasn't exactly happy about the rent, but it wasn't like she had any other choice. Scott, as usual, threw in a few last-minute digs about me, thinking I was better than everyone, but couldn't even manage a decent argument. Their bags were packed, the moving trucks out front. They weren't fighting it anymore. Karen came to me in the kitchen that morning, her face tight, but she wasn't angry. She was just resigned. "We'll be out by the end of the day," she said. I nodded, not saying much. There wasn't anything left to say. Scott, of course, tried to keep up his usual smug demeanor, but I could tell it was just a mask. He avoided my eyes as he carried boxes to the truck, like he didn't want to acknowledge that I was in control now. I could have said something, could have gotten one last word in, but I didn't. I didn't need to. They knew who was in charge now, and that was enough. As the last of their things were loaded onto the truck, I stood at the door, watching them pull away. The house was quiet again. Mine. Not just in terms of ownership, but in every way that mattered. The chaos, the tension, the fear of losing everything. I had fought for all of it, and now I had my life back. This wasn't about winning the fight. It was about who would still be standing when the dust settled. I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel victorious. But I felt a kind of peace I hadn't known in a long time. It wasn't the peace of someone who had taken everything from others. It was the peace of someone who had rebuilt from nothing. The real lesson wasn't in the fights I'd won or the ground I'd gained. It was in how I let them take everything without realizing what I was capable of rebuilding. The business, the house, the respect. It wasn't in what they took from me. It was in what I made out of the pieces they left behind. And this time, I was building it for me.